Hi everyone, welcome to the Social Exchange Drams from Afar Wednesday edition. I hope everyone's well. Again, I hope everyone's keeping safe, keeping themselves entertained reasonably well. It's yeah, we're all kind of falling into a bit of a groove now, aren't we? This is just what we do. We hang out at home. It's yeah, it's just become the new normal. So I hope that everyone's dealing with it okay. What I normally do during these sessions is give shout outs to people that I think are just doing really cool things, or you know, keeping their chin up really well during these times. And this time I'd just like to say we should all give ourselves a huge pat on the back. I think we're all doing an amazing job. It's not easy, you know, it's not easy just staying home and not being able to go out and socialise and do the things that we would normally do, and a lot of people are under a lot of stress. So I think it's about time that we took a step back and went, you know what, I think we're doing a bloody awesome job. So huge shout out to all of us. We are live, as you can see. So if you have any questions, throw them into the comments. I have my lovely assistant Simon Modre helping me out again today. So he can read the questions out to me if any pop up. So yeah, feel free to get interactive. Right, what are we going to do today? Today we are going to talk about Sipsmith Gin and the Martini. So this was a special request from Mark Gerber. How you doing? Thought I'd touch on this one, and this is a really a pretty cool drink. And it falls in line with exactly what I've been talking about all along, which is easy drinks to make at home, kind of demystifying the whole thing. And also knowing that if you know how to make a martini, you actually know how to make one or two other drinks as well. So that's pretty cool. So what we'll do is, first of all, I'll have a chat to you about gin, then I will make you a martini, and then we can drink it. Sound like a plan? Awesome. Okay. So, gin has this awesome backstory. It basically was introduced to England by William of Orange, and at that point it wasn't gin as we know it. It was a beverage called Geneva, which was a distilled malt wine that tasted bloody horrible, and so was flavoured with botanicals like juniper. And so this was sort of the very beginning of gin as a spirit. And when it was introduced to the English, it was by the Dutch, who were carrying it in hip flasks into war and drinking it, so that to give themselves Dutch courage, basically having a couple of drinks in order to build up their confidence and make them feel like they could take on the world. So that's where the little phrase Dutch courage came from. And at this point it was then introduced to England, and it was actually really cheap to buy. And so this was in the 1700s. And it started a whole period of time called the gin craze, which lasted sort of 40 or 50 years. And basically was just all of London just being totally debaucherous all the time. Massive quantities of gin were being made. Every fourth building was producing gin. And it's a whole story in and of itself. So I won't go into massive amounts of detail on that, because honestly I could just talk to you about that for an hour. But that's kind of how gin was introduced to London. And during these times, gin, well, actually all along, gin and juniper have had these health-giving properties. So that's another good reason for us to be talking about it. If you look at, this is it's a macabre thing to think about, but if you look at those pictures of the plague doctors from the Black Plague, and you know how they had on like these masks that looked like they had beaks? So that beak part of the mask, that was filled with crushed juniper, because juniper was supposed to ward off infections. So there you go, there's a little fun factoid for you to bring out at dinner parties. Basically what gin is it's a neutral spirit that's then been flavoured with botanicals. This particular gin, Sipsmith, was brought into production in 2009. So again, it's a fun little story. There were two blokes, Sam and Fairfax, and they were these really good mates. They grew up together in Cornwall, and they were best buds. And then they kind of lost touch. And one day they both found themselves in America working for big booze companies. and they reconnected and they started hanging out again, and they started talking about, you know, their childhood dream of owning an artisanal distillery. And so they were talking and talking and talking, and they thought, well, bugger it, let's just do it. And they went balls to the wall. So they sold their houses and put their families into rented accommodation in order to fund the purchase of the property, which is still there, and it's just a little residential property in West Hammersmith, just in a residential street. So they bought that, and they bought their still. They bought Prudence, her name is. She's a 300 litre copper pot still, absolutely beautiful. So they had two major ingredients. They had a distillery and they had a still. And then they met a bloke called Jared Brown, who was this really cool cocktail historian and distiller, and he became their master distiller. So everything started falling into place. But unfortunately, the UK government didn't want to grant them a distillery license, and they were sort of stuck. Well, can we get our houses back? We've sold our houses. We've put everything we have into this, and now you're saying we can't have a license because there were various old laws which weren't really applicable in modern London, but the government hadn't granted a distillery license in London for this copper pot gin in 189 years. So everything took a long time to sort of come to fruition. But eventually, 2009, they got the license, and everything started happening. So this is the result of that. It's a London Dry Gin, which doesn't necessarily mean it has to be made in London. It does mean that it needs to be juniper forward, so have lots of juniper going on in it. You can't add more than 0.05 grams of sugar per litre, and you can't add any flavours or bits and pieces, distillates, after distillation has happened. Okay, so once distillation happens, that's it. It's actually a really cool website. If you go and check it out, then they've got 3 stills: Prudence, Patience and Constance. Prudence and Patience are 300 litres each, Constance is 1500, and you can jump on and you can see at any point what each of those stills are doing, so whether they're macerating or whether they're distilling, etc, etc. Yeah, it's a nice fun interactive we've got mosquitoes everywhere. Nice fun interactive website. So yeah, go check it out. Let's have a little taste. I put it in my Lafroy glass, sorry about that. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's everything that you would come to expect from a really high quality London Dry style gin. So this particular gin has 10 botanicals in it. Let's see if I can remember them in front of you. It'd be embarrassing if I couldn't. So we've got juniper, we've got coriander, we've got angelica, we've got lemon peel and orange peel. We've got orris root, licorice root, ground almond, cassia bark and cinnamon bark. Okay, so there are 10 botanicals going on. It's really interesting actually. I've done a number of tastings with this, and once you say licorice root, a lot of people can really pick up on that. So yeah, what they're really proud of at Sipsmith is the fact that they do what they call one-shot distillation. So all of these things go into the still, and what comes out is a high-proof version of the gin, okay? And then all we need to add is water. We don't do anything else to it. We don't add any other grain, neutral spirit, etc, etc. What goes in, comes out is just a higher proof of exactly the same product. So yeah, something to be a bit proud of there. Now, a martini. Okie doke. So the martini is an interesting drink. It's evolved a lot since its conception. The original martini would actually have been made with, here we go, sweet vermouth, orange bitters and gin. Okay, quite different to what we know today. And that probably would have been equal parts sweet vermouth and gin, and then a couple of dashes of bitters. So that kind of falls into like a true cocktail recipe that has bitters in it and sweeteners in it. What we know today is something very, very different. So I'll try and demystify that a little bit for you. These days we don't use sweet vermouth, we use dry vermouth. Now, I didn't actually have any dry vermouth at home, and so my sister has come and dropped me down some, so it's just poured into this little glass here, which is very kind of her. Thanks, Hayley. So what we do, I'll make this for you first, okay, so you can see what I'm talking about. Basically, I'm going to, first of all, chill down my martini glass, okay? So I'll just do that. And now I'm going to put 60 mils of gin into a stirring glass. If you don't have a stirring glass, that's fine. Put it into a pint glass and stir it around with some ice and a spoon. Okay, so 60 mils, 2 shots, there we go. Okay, so there's my gin. Now, I'm not going to put any vermouth into this. This is the way I make a martini, okay? Now, I know everyone makes them differently, but I like my martinis really, really dry, which doesn't mean lots of dry vermouth. The drier the martini, the less vermouth we're actually putting in there. So it's a bit confusing, but a wet martini would have lots of vermouth and a dry martini has not much vermouth, okay? So I'm just going to add heaps of ice there, and I'm going to give that a nice little stir, okay? Now, I don't want it to get too watery. A little straw here. Just have a little taste. Yep, so that's actually pretty good. Cool. So now what I'm going to do, chuck all the ice over the side.
Oh.
Right, now this is my little bit of vermouth, okay? All I'm going to do is pour a little bit into this glass, and I'm going to swirl it round, okay? So it's just coating that glass and it's sticking nicely to it. Then I'm going to ditch the rest, okay? I only put about 5 mils in there, so I'm not being super wasteful, okay? And then I'm going to pour my very cold gin into this lovely martini glass, also on loan from my sister, because I broke all of my martini glasses. Okay, so that is a very dry martini. Winston Churchill's definition of a dry martini was literally drink some really cold gin while you're staring at a bottle of vermouth. So he really liked his dry. There are a couple of other things that you can talk about when you're talking about martinis. So garnish is a big one. I personally like my martinis with olives, which I will do for you now. Now this is a really cute little thing. I don't know if you can see it, but this was a wedding present from my auntie and uncle. It's a lassie, and if you see, it's a little dancer, and she bends down, and now she's got a little toothpick in her hand. So thanks, Lisa and Hugh. That's coming in super handy now.
Bring it closer and do it again. That was cool.
Bring it closer and do it again. Okay, I will. Oh, Mod's just going to do it for me. Thanks, hon. There, you see?
How good is that? Coombsy, cool. I can see you're there. Look at that, Peter Coombs. How good is that?
Very cool. Okay, so I've just popped my olives on there. Interesting little fact. When you put olives in your martini, you should always garnish in odd numbers. That's actually true of pretty much any garnish, with one exception. If I wanted to make this martini not a martini but a Gibson, then I would take some little cocktail onions, okay, got my little pickle grabber here, there we go, and take my toothpick off the lady. Now a Gibson is always garnished with 2 cocktail onions traditionally. This is because a Gibson was created for Charles Gibson, who was an artist in the 20s, whose big thing was that he drew basically the depiction of the ideal of female beauty. So the idea behind the 2 onions is that they're supposed to represent these perfect women's breasts. So there you go, fun fact. I personally like olives in mine. If you're talking about a dirty martini, then that involves adding some olive brine, so the juice from the olive jar. And I came across an interesting one the other day, which was a burnt martini. Now, I haven't actually seen this done before, but it did interest me, and I'm going to give it a try myself later on. Basically, it's exactly that, but with a smoky Isla whiskey rinse first. So I might try that with a bottle of Lafroig, I'm reckoning. It was just on a little site that I was looking at. Burnt martini. So I'll give that one a crack. Okay, let's try this. Yeah, it's really, really yummy. It's exactly what I felt like today, actually. I don't drink martinis that often. I tend to drink more whiskey than gin. But that's absolutely perfect for me right now. Any questions there? Anything that anybody would like answered, or no? He's typing away on my laptop. He's decided not to be helpful.
I'm typing away to people. Onion breasts okay from Peter. Hayley says she's that's a Berlin station chief. What's a Berlin station chief, Peter? Hayley said that you're welcome for her loaning the...
Well, thank you again very much.
And Chris Britton was very happy that you nailed the 10 out of 10 from memory.
Oh, yes, well, when you've got one job, you better spend time memorising things like that.
Yeah, well, reminds
cool.
me of the wedding vows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okie doke. Well, that's me signing off then for another night. If you've got any questions that are just occurring to you, throw them in the comments and I'll look back and answer anything I can. If you've got any requests for next week, by all means, jump on. Mods wants to demonstrate the Alessi toothpick holder to you one more time. There she is. And there she goes. Perfect. Okay, guys, on that note, have a very lovely evening, and I will see you same time next week. Cheers. Bye.